Hello everyone, how's it going? So, Elden Ring Shadow the Erdtree, I 100%ed it. At least I think I did, because when it comes to FromSoftware games, there's always a type of situation where you don't know if you did everything. The DLC doesn't come with any trophies, and it's entirely based on your own whether you actually 100% it or not. And the reason I say that is because there are still things in the core game that people are discovering to this day. So I think that this situation with Shadow of the Erdtree, that they're going to be things that people discover, an optional dungeon that's just hidden far out of the way. So at the point of right now, I've done everything I could possibly do. I looked up guides, I looked up everything to make sure I got every dungeon, every weapon, everything has been done. So I'm going to leave that as kind of 100%. And since I'm not the biggest Elden Ring lore expert like Vati, I'm going to be more face-to-face about this instead of doing my highly edited video where I go into detail about everything. I'm going to go into as much detail as possible. This review will contain spoilers, but I'm going to do more of a face-to-face with some gameplay spliced in. So, Shadow of the Erdtree. What is the narrative here? Well, we finally get to learn about Miquella's true intentions, and we find out Miquella is actually the bad guy. No, not, well, the bad guy per se. In this DLC, we learn about how Miquella becomes a god. We go into the Shadow Realm, not like in Yu-Gi-Oh!, and we learned how Miquella step by step went through the process of removing parts of himself to become a god. There are these crosses that showcase what he removed in each location. And we also learned about Morg's true intent. So one of the biggest revelations and one of the biggest memes in the core game was the fact that Morg had this type of unhealthy relationship with Miquella, and we learned that it was all a farce, that Morg was actually the first victim of Miquella that we find. And I think it's spectacular because it shows that the writers had this entirely planned from the start. I mean, granted, it is FromSoftware, but it's just one of those revelations where you're like, oh my god, we need to give him an apology. We are so sorry. I mean, he does give you a sweet weapon, so I would have killed him anyway, but yeah, it just showcases that that was the first victim, because we learned that Miquella is basically pulling a Reaper from Mass Effect, or even Makarai from Persona 5, where he's using, well, not the Reapers use indoctrination through force to convince you to do what they want, but Miquella's case uses kindness and compassion to mold your mind to thinking that he is the best option to lead you forward to destroy the world of hate and anger and bring about a world of compassion and love. And all it will cost you is your freedom of mind. Like, there's this instant in the game where a charm is broken, and I'm just like, what just happened? Did I do something wrong? And then you slowly see all the NPCs in the world start to regain their freedom and have no idea what to do to move forward. They start to doubt Miquella, but there are some of them that still are completely infatuated with him in a way like they don't want their freedom back, but they still trust Miquella's plan. It's not really conveyed correctly, or maybe I'm just too stupid to understand, but the game ends up leading to this final confrontation where you lead the charge against Miquella, and the people who want to stand by him fight you, while the people who stand against him fight on your side. And what I really love about this DLC is that all the side content, at least most of it, is in conjunction or complements the mainline content. Like, you're supposed to do the side content to gain these allies who fight against Miquella for their own reasons. Granted, you do have situations where they temporarily betray you, but there are a large part of the game where they are either with you or against you. And I love how by the final part of the game, if you played your cards right, if you did the side content, you're gaining additional help in the way of these people who decide, I am standing against Miquella and I'm with you. And then there's the opposite side where they're like, I'm for Miquella and I will kill you. In a way, it does showcase that they've regained their freedom, and by choice they've decided to side with Miquella. Now, in terms of the narrative, I really did like it a lot more than the core game, because FromSoftware has a notorious history of just making a narrative that's very hard to follow. I mean, I followed the Dark Souls story pretty well, but it still was complicated when it came to the side content and the side lore. When it came to the mainline content, I got it almost immediately, but that's what I kind of liked about Elden Ring. They kind of just shove it into your face. Hey, this is Miquella, this was what Miquella is doing, and as long as you pay attention to the clues, I think you can figure it out. Now, that's the story, and I really liked it for what it presented, especially towards the finale. I did not expect Radon to be the final boss. I actually 100% was expecting it to be Melania in terms of, I'm the Blade of Mikola, and how many times I've heard that line. I thought it was going to be Melania before she succumbed to the Scarlet Rot. But the more I thought about it, I was like, it had to be Radon, because in the case of Melania, I guess you can make the argument after she goes through her transformation, that's her at 100%. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but the way I saw it was that Melania regains her arms, her leg, and fights you with all her strength in addition to additional strength, and I feel like that's her at 100%. Whereas Radon, you never fight him at 100%. No matter how you look at it, he's basically an animal at this point that needs to be put down. He's just operating at the most baseline instinct. He's no different from the wolves and the birds that you've been fighting throughout this entire game. And I felt like fighting Radon actually at his full strength right now was probably the most fitting thing possible. I also thought the idea that you find out that he's using Morg's ashes to regain his body was also brilliant, and how they allow Radon to use some of his abilities, such as his blood magic, and I thought that was amazing. I did find it suspicious that you couldn't use these shackles that you used to hinder Morg, which would have been a brilliant idea, but I guess it's because it's so much Radon in there. Like, FromSoftware is known for these incredible levels of detail, so I guess they decided, hey, there's so much Radon in here that whatever is left of Morg is just gone. But I like that. I'll get more to gameplay of how I do also think that the boss fight is not that great, but in terms of the narrative, I think they did a very good established job of setting up Mikola and showcasing his rise to godhood. Now let's talk about the gameplay. The gameplay for Shadow of the Erdtree brought up the same stupid argument about when it comes to FromSoftware games and difficulty. It's like every time a new FromSoftware game comes out, or a Souls-like game comes out, we have this argument about difficulty. I think the way they handled the difficulty was really good. Now, you can over-prepare yourself in the most, I guess, opposite way that you can think of. Like, you can get all the items from the core campaign, you can get all the weapons, Ashes of War, Spirit Ashes, all that stuff, and I feel like that gives you more options. Granted, the weapons in the DLC are super overpowered, but I feel like that's a way of overpowering yourself, like just getting all the weapons and armor you can possibly have in order to give you an array of options to conquer the DLC. And I like the idea that you start from level 0. Technically, the game has a leveling system of 1 to 20. You get Erdtree fragments, or Scattertree. I'm going to call it Erdtree. With Erdtree fragments in order to level your character up from 1 to 20. And that's basically the leveling system of the DLC. It ensures that everyone is on a level playing ground, regardless of whether you start the DLC after you defeat Morg, or when you defeat Radagon, or Melania. It doesn't matter. Like, the Morg fight is the prerequisite until you can access the DLC. But I feel like you do have the option to technically over-level by getting all the armor and weapons you can possibly imagine. But then you're still at level 0 because you need to get this brand new leveling system in order. Now, I'm not a fan of the seeds in the way that there are a number of them. Like, in the original core campaign, there are an overabundance of seeds, so you can get more than you need. So I felt like they should have added at least 5 more, or even 10 more, so you can get to 1 to 20. And I feel like after you get to 1 to 20, they'll start giving you something else, like runes or an item, something else. So you don't have to get all of them. You just have to get at least 20 of them. Same thing for the Spirit Ashes, where you can only get, I think, 10. I don't remember the exact number, but there is an exact number of Spirit Ashes you can also get. I feel like they should have also done the same thing, where they give you a lot more than is needed. But in terms of, once you get the leveling system down, the game becomes significantly easier, and not easier, but manageable. There are people who are literally speedrunning through the DLC. These are expert players with level 0 technically builds, or level 1, depending on how you look at it. But I think that this leveling system is a great way of ensuring everyone comes into the DLC at an even playing ground. They don't there's no way for you to over level yourself to prepare yourself for the DLC once you enter it. But once you get the tree fragments and you're able to level your character up, things become a little easier as you go on. Now, this has the classic FromSoftware design where there are entire areas within the game, like there's an entire region in the lower end where you can fight a dragon god, and it's completely missable. It's an entire side quest that you can miss out on. And there's also like a finger boss, the Mother of Fingers, which is a completely another side quest, which takes you to different regions around the world, which I guess is more or less a way for you to explore those regions. It forces you to go into those areas because you need to in order to complete these requirements to ring these bells. So that's a way to push you to do that. But when it comes to the mainline content, there are entire areas that you absolutely do not need to even go into. Like there's a boss fight with Commander Gygas, Tree Sentinels are in the area, the Mother boss, the Mother of Fingers. There are a lot of boss fights that are completely optional and hidden and out of the way, and they reward you with some really decent gear that complements whatever build you want, from strength, magic, dexterity. There are a lot of weapons and different items that will make you into an overpowered god. If you take the items from this DLC to the core campaign, you're going to demolish those bosses. Granted, there's still an even level of difficulty because some of the bosses like Melania still have the ability to like regen health, or Malakov, who can literally destroy your health with his Ashes of War, where he just depletes your health, which is a way to keep things balanced in a way. Yeah, you can still demolish them with the different magical spells and abilities you have, but for the most part, it is well balanced in the sense that each enemy has special abilities, and there are things hidden throughout the game which encourages exploration. There's still that classic where some areas are so well hidden that you simply need to know where they are. There are some areas in guides I've explored where I'm just like, how the hell are you gonna find this? Like, you have to purposely fall through a hole or go through a very tiny ledge on a mountainside. Granted, it's a way to encourage the geometry to complement the environment, so I can't really blame them for doing that. But I think FromSoftware still needs some kind of system where they can guide the player more efficiently, but I guess this is just their style. Like, it's something they're not going to really address because it's just something they think is really good for exploration, which I can't argue against. There is that sense of discovery when it comes to this DLC that's absolutely wonderful. Now, when it comes to the cast of characters, for the most part, they're okay. None of them really stand out. I would say the Blood Knight probably stands out a little more. I'm, again, bad with names. He was an attendant to Morgue, and I like the idea that after you kill him, you kind of weigh in whether you want to tell him what happened. And there's always the system that I've always was mixed about when it comes to FromSoftware games, where if you tell the truth or you try and do the right thing, your reward is the character going completely mad and trying to kill you, or some sort of dark story. I kind of like the idea here that with this character, you know who I'm talking about, he accepts it. He's like the only rational thinker in the entire game, where he's just like, you know what, you did what was necessary, it was an honorable duel, and it technically wasn't even your fault. He was under Mikola's charm, so I'm not angry with you. It is what happened, and now he sees it as a chance to use the person who defeated Lord Morgue in killing Mikola in a way. So I guess we are being used, but in a way, at least he's not going completely insane. You killed Lord Morgue, I'm going to kill you situation, which we're all familiar with. There is one side mission with a character named Freya that I really didn't like, and the reason I didn't like was because there is a very obtuse way for you to lock yourself out from the finale of that side quest if you don't give a key item. If you give a key item to the knight that I just talked about, he disappears. The problem is you need to talk to him before you talk to Freya in order to tell him where she is. And the issue with that is that they're in two completely different areas. Like, well, not technically two areas, but they're separated by such a large amount of distance that most of us will go down and give the scroll to the Blood Knight, because between the key item and where he's located is so short, as opposed to where Freya is and where he is. So if you lose out on that, you have to essentially go against him, which if you go against him, you lose access to, well, a really good ally. So in a way, I was just like, why? So that's the only real criticism I have with one of the side quests. I mean, for the most part, FromSoftware is kind of cryptic when it comes to these side quests. When it comes with Elden Ring, there's always this very fickle point of no return when it comes to a lot of these side quests. If you've ever did the Alexander the Great side quest with the pot, it's explanatory of what these side quests deal with. Like, there's always that point where you don't know what's going on, and even if you do know where it's going on, you just have to find them and be kind of lucky with the situation. But overall, I was satisfied with the fact that all the side quests kind of lead to the end game, where if you play your cards right, you'll gain a lot more allies in the final fight, and you're definitely going to need it. Now, let's talk about Radahn. Now, Radahn has been basically the talk of Elden Ring when it comes to difficulty naturally. I think it's a really sound argument. I know there are a lot of videos coming out showcasing people beating Radahn, no hit, parry build, no armor, all this stuff, killing him with 5 or 6 hits. And those, I would say, are like the top 1% of Elden Ring players. Like, when this DLC came out, FromSoftware noticed that it was so difficult, they even decided to lower the difficulty, which I don't think they've ever done in any other game. Yeah, there have been balance changes. There is actually a great YouTuber, I'll leave him linked below, where he plays first builds of games like Dark Souls and Bloodborne. And when Dark Souls 1 first came out, I would say it was a whole new level of difficult. Like the 1.0 build, oh my god. Yeah, there were a few glitches where you can break the game, but for the most part, I would say the 1.0 of like Dark Souls, of Bloodborne, those are the real challenges when it comes to this game, especially Bloodborne, if you want to deal with those loading screens. But yeah, I don't think there's ever been a precedence where they actively lowered the difficulty so quickly, not because of balancing, but because they felt like they went too far. And when it came to Radahn, it took me 3 days to beat this boss. He was that difficult. I looked up strategies, I looked up builds, I just looked up everything I could possibly imagine, and I had to completely redo my character to the point that it was unrecognizable just to beat this boss. And I beat the boss by just a nose hair. Like, I got so freaking lucky when I beat the boss. And yeah, I think the issue is just the leap in difficulty when it comes to Radahn. The previous penultimate boss, story-wise, is a boss named Romina, who's like this hybrid bug centipede creature. And this is not a flex. I beat the boss without even trying. The way I go into bosses for FromSoftware games or Souls-like games is I go into the boss fully expecting to die just to learn the pattern. I bring in whatever I can, like I don't bring in summons or anything. And I beat the boss so effortlessly. I had no summons, no NPC summon, which I had the option for. And it got to the point where I was like, should I just kill myself so I can beat the boss in a lot more effective and more stylized way? I like to beat bosses like Devil May Cry. But when I saw the boss was at 1/10 of its health, I was just like, you know what? I'm just going to kill her. Like, it was just so damn easy. I wasn't trying at all. Like, and after I beat it, I was just like, huh. You would expect this boss to be a little more challenging, seeing that it's a major story requirement and leap. And the thing is, after you beat that boss, the area, the dungeon you get into in order to get to Radahn is hugely much more difficult because of these divine beast guardians. Like, these bosses are so tough that I actually got recommended a YouTube video of these Elden Ring fights where people put NPCs to fight bosses. These guys are so powerful, they beat every boss in the game. The YouTuber showed them beating almost every boss in the game with ease. That's how powerful these NPCs are. Fighting one of them is a challenge. Fighting all 3 where they can stun lock you indefinitely, I can only imagine. Heck, just put them to fight Radahn. They would kick his ass. But yeah, it's just the massive skill that just skyrockets with this. The difficulty is so high between Romania and Radahn that it's absolutely crazy. Like, I don't know who did this, but FromSoftware is technically pretty good when it comes to gradually increasing boss fights. Like, I can't think of a single boss outside from Dark Eater Midir, but granted, he is an optional boss that's really well hidden, that would be so difficult that it would test the player's true mettle. Like, I would argue Dark Eater Midir is actually harder than Gale. I know probably someone punched their screen or says like they're gonna type in a death threat to me, but literally I spend more time on Dark Eater Midir than any other boss. Well, Radahn has now taken the #1 spot than any other FromSoft boss. And I felt with this situation, the difficulty was just so obtusely high between these two bosses that something had to happen. Like maybe there was a boss that was cut in the middle of this, because that's the way I see it. I feel like maybe the Divine Beast Guardians were going to be a boss, considering how tough they are. Granted, there is a boss fight, but it's against Miquella's diehard appointees, basically the people who've sided with Miquella, which is not that hard of a fight, because if you played your cards right, you get 2 other helpers who assist you in the fight, and I beat it on my first try. So in that case, I think I beat him on my first try. I'm not really sure. I don't remember, because I literally spent 3 days on Radahn. But it just seems like the difficulty spike between the last boss fights and Radahn is just so high. I don't know if you would count the NPC fights as bosses. I don't know. But yeah, it's just such a massive leap that I think that something had to been cut between them that literally would answer what happened here. But that's how I see it. Like, I just felt like Radahn's fight was just so ungodly hard. Like, granted, I get it. He's Radahn. He's always been depicted throughout the Elden Ring campaign as being literally one of the most powerful beings in the entire Elden Ring universe. The guy literally held back the stars, and this is when he was completely driven mad by the Scarlet Rot. So I get what they were going for, but I felt like it could have been tuned a little better. I don't know. Like, my biggest tune I would have been is like, I don't know. I guess I can't really think of one, because I think I would say reduce his health, but he's supposed to be a powerhouse. But then I would say reduce his attack power, but then again, he's Radahn, so I don't really know. I'm not a game designer, but I just felt like the skill gap between Radahn and the previous fights were just so high. Like, I beat Mesmer pretty relatively easily. Like, it took me 3 or 4 tries to beat the guy. Like, his attack patterns aren't that hard. They're really a lot of flash. Like, Mesmer is a lot of flash with very little substance, in my opinion. Like, all you have to do is stay underneath him, or do the Bloodborne strategy of staying behind or at the side of him, and he can't really do much. Same thing for the snake attacks. It's like, it's a lot of flash, but if you just dodge like 2 or 3 times at the right point, he opens himself up to a very large beatdown, especially if you get Hornsont on your side and you summon an ally to fight with you. Like, Mesmer was actually not that hard, and I did this before the patch, I believe. But yeah, in terms of like just Radahn, I think like there should be an argument, discussion of whether the skill gap between Radahn and the previous fights were too high. Or maybe I'm wrong about that and I should just get good. But that's how I felt about the gameplay. It's still spectacular and absolutely amazing. Everything else about the game, absolutely great. Like, if you like the Elden Ring, there's really no complaint for the music, the presentation, the design, everything. The only real profound issue, and I would say this knocks off actual points for the game, is the technical stability of the game. Even now, things would load in a second later. I played on the PS5, like the grass and the textures would take a couple of seconds to load. Granted, the game never crashed on me, so that is something, but I did feel like the game could have been a little more polished. I'm sure they'll fix it over time, but for now, like, there's still like technical issues, like with how the world loads in a little like choppy. It reminds me a lot of like The Evil Within with the textures, where it takes like a second for everything to load in. So I think the presentation is definitely something they need to work on in terms of the technical stability. Again, the game never crashed, and this game is absolutely insane for the amount of content they give you minus the amount of money. Especially in this day and age where you're being nickeled and dimed, and a freaking Call of Duty skin costs more than this DLC campaign. That's right, this costs $40, and there are some Call of Duty skins that cost $40 to $60. Like, buy this instead. It's absolutely amazing. But yeah, that's what I think about it. I think this is definitely a 10 out of 10 expansion for a 10 out of 10 game. I still think Monster Hunter World Iceborne is my favorite expansion of all time, but that's because I came into Monster Hunter World fresh, and I feel like it just blew me in a way that Elden Ring didn't, because I came from like Dark Souls and I came from Bloodborne, so I had a certain level of expectation, but don't let that mitigate what I'm giving this. This is a perfect 10, one of the best expansions ever played. Heck, I would even argue this is like Game of the Year material at this point. Like, well, my Game of the Year is Final Fantasy VII Rebirth at the point, but this is an easy second, with third being Stellar Blade. But yeah, this is absolutely worth your time, 100% fantastic, and other than my minor complaints about the difficulty spikes and the presentations, it's an absolute joyride. And if you loved Elden Ring, you're gonna get more than your fill here. I just love the story, and we finally got to see Mikola, and I can't wait to see what they have in store with us. Whether they do an Elden Ring 2 or they decide, I don't know. I really hope they do an Elden Ring 2, but I would argue that they kind of filled the story here with the finale of this game, but we'll wait and see. Like, I wouldn't be opposed to an Elden Ring 2. But tell me what you think in the comments below. I know this was more raw and talking about it, but I felt like I got my point across. Anyway, that's it for me. Bye.